All right. It is 9 a.m. Thursday, April 20th in 2023. I'm Chris von Lindenberg. Grateful to be with you today. I have two amazing colleagues of mine, Justin Lynham, a lifelong friend, former law enforcement professional, fellow financial advisor, works with a large segment of our client base, and also Vince Carbonaro, licensed as a financial advisor, current law enforcement professional, longtime client relationship of the firm for over a decade, and excited for him as he transitions out of law enforcement in the next couple of years to be full-time with the firm. Super grateful to be with you today. Today, we're doing a roundtable, sort of another segment of our coffee talk conversation about challenges that stand in the way as you approach law enforcement retirement. That is eligibility, but also if there's a deadline where it's time to go. So all too often we hear rumblings of things that stand in the way, folks procrastinating or challenges that they're faced with. And so I just wanted to open it up with my colleagues, my teammates, to talk about them and say, what are some of the things that we hear day in and day out? Justin, being prior law enforcement, Vince, current law enforcement, you're in the trenches today. What are some of the things that you hear that are challenges folks are facing that doesn't quite get them over the edge to make that decision?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, I'll let Justin start.
No. All right. Well, fair. All right. So, I think a lot of folks in the law enforcement profession, they get accustomed to doing things a certain way, and there's a certain language associated with that profession or industry. And when the thought or the threat of having to leave and learn something new is kind of a daunting task. It's like, hey, it's like learning a whole other language. Just it becomes overwhelming, and I think that holds people back from leaving or exploring other opportunities that they could potentially be good at. I think the other challenge that they face too is trying to translate that unique skill set that they have into what may be applicable in the private sector. And again, they get hung up in their mind on that, and it's very difficult again for them to figure out what is the right fit professionally if I should walk away.
Mm.
Because again, they're only doing this. They've been doing this one task for so long; it just really becomes ingrained in their identity.
Just it's almost like, hey, I don't know how to be a civilian.
Yeah.
How do I transition to civilian life, right? So, all right, Vince, what's one or two of the challenges that you come across that you hear around the water cooler at work?
So I've had several coworkers over the years who are excited about retirement and want to make the transition to the private sector, or perhaps even a different government job. And they've been police maybe 20 or 25 years. They started when they were 21 years old. Maybe they got into the academy before they had finished their bachelor's degree. And even though they're outstanding investigators, or they've been in a specialty assignment for years and would be a fantastic employee anywhere they go, I've heard tell that because they may have not completed their bachelor's degree or some form of higher education, there's this barrier to entry. And so they have to hurry towards the end of their career to complete that education so that they can make the transition and earn the salary that they deserve with the experience that they have.
Yes, that's a really interesting perspective. When I think of law enforcement professionals, I think of folks who are reliable, dependable, trustworthy, helpful, right? Like they show up on time, they say what they do, like they're willing to be part of solutions and problem solving every day very quickly. Like I view them as highly employable. But I think
Absolutely.
sometimes people have this self-defeating mindset that, I don't know anything else. I'm not trained in anything else. I don't have this or I don't have that. And they may take themselves out. They defeat themselves before they even give it a shot, give it a chance. Hmm.
Yep.
I sometimes hear that people don't have anything lined up and they just simply don't know where to start, right? Where do I look? Like I only know police work and I don't know what else I would be good at. Right? I hear that that's a challenge. Justin, what's another one that you've stumbled across?
Um, that's a good question. um, man,
Oftentimes I think we get set in our ways, right? If we're comfortable, if we have a particular assignment, we've been there for years, and
true.
we haven't wanted to change that assignment maybe for 10 or 15 years. I would suggest that maybe it'd be a great opportunity in that last 5 years of your career to angle for a specialty assignment, maybe, digital forensics, investigations into financial fraud, something of that nature, I know we have clients that are in those fields and have made successful transitions into the private sector or other government jobs because they made the conscious decision to get the training and move on to a specialty assignment later in their career. Have you, I mean, you've seen that in our dealings with clients and coworkers, right?
Vince, you know what just popped into my head as you said that is I think there's a risk of people staying also in a specialty assignment for too long. I mean, the good thing about a specialty assignment is that you're getting laser focused on a particular skill set, which so long as it transfers into civilian, the civilian world or private sector, that's great. Like you think of dog handling, canine, right? Bomb dogs, like there's a need for that outside of just being a sworn law enforcement professional, stadiums, special events, venues, things like that. But there's also, I think, a risk that if you don't round yourself out properly as a professional and get out of your comfort zone and learn new things, there is a risk if you stay in a specialty field for too long, right?
Right.
Like if all you've ever
Yeah.
done is almost like a SWAT role, like I don't know what the application is for that, government
Sure,
contractor.
you could parlay that into potentially training security services.
That's a
You
great
know,
idea.
in my own case, you're exactly right. I mean, I've been a homicide investigator now for 11 years. So that is something that would be difficult to take into the private sector. The skills that I've learned from doing that, I may be able to take into the private sector. But certainly as I approach retirement, I've had the opportunity to start studying, taking licensing exams. And these were things that weren't necessarily in my wheelhouse or comfort zone. But as I've spent the time over the last couple of years working on them, I've become more comfortable with them in anticipation for retirement and working with you guys full time.
I got to pay you a compliment because not only are you an amazing student of the business, you're an excellent steward with your own resources, but with your background as a detective, frankly, you're really good at active listening, which serves our clients well. The details are really important to you, which also serves the type of work that we do well. And you're really good at communicating with people. And really, it's a natural fit for you in so many ways. So I think that's huge. Justin, I'm going to throw one your way. There's, I think, oftentimes some anxiety or some uneasiness about change, right?
Mhm.
And you think about the transition out of a law enforcement career field that you've been doing for 20, 25 years, right? Maybe prior military. Um, what are your thoughts on that? Like, how easy was it for you when you retired from police work? How easy was that, like psychologically?
Well, I can tell you, I've experienced it both as an individual going through the process, but also as a spouse,
Mm.
having a wife as a law enforcement officer, just recently retired, just a few weeks ago, and what that felt like to me with her going through that. And I can tell you, there's anxiety for you as the person going through it, but there's also anxiety for your family going through that as well because of that change that's happening. Um, you know, Go back to the language. You get accustomed to doing a certain thing a certain way and kind of talking the talk a certain way. And then when you jump from one specific industry to another industry, there's a whole other language that you have to learn. There's all these acronyms and there's so many things that you have to become accustomed to. And there's a period of acclimation there that, you know, honestly, it was probably a year, 2 years of really shedding that cop identity and trying to assume a different role identity as a civilian, as a financial advisor. Um, you know, it takes a while. It doesn't happen overnight. And I can also tell you that as a spouse, watching my wife go through that same process on her end, walking away from a law enforcement role into a civilian role, uh, she even came in. She's like, they're throwing all these acronyms out there. I don't even know what they're talking about. It's like, but they're expecting me to know. And well, it just comes down to just being in the industry long enough to figure it out. Ask questions, right? Be open minded, be receptive, be a student, and you'll get through it. You just got to stick with it.
Justin, we've had a long friendship back to our teenage years, and we're very close, your family and mine. And I got to tell you, even from the sidelines, just hearing how you explain that, like it made me think like how we had to support you professionally in some aspects and as a friend as she was going through this recent retirement. But when you went through retirement, right? Like if you think about transitions with money are something that we really excel at, but retirement, from law enforcement is not just a transition with money. It is a life-changing transition. It is one of the most significant, right? You're shedding a professional identity that you had, right? Do you have the support of your family? Like, think of what your spouse was going through, but you were able to help cope because you'd already been through it, right?
Sure.
And still getting acclimated. But there's such a period of change. And are we getting support from our spouse? Are we getting support from our family? Are we getting support from our friends? And are we willing to even talk about the challenges? And too often we're like trained as law enforcement professionals, you're trained to have this stoic,
Harder.
this hard shell. And you know what? It's a vulnerable time, right? So
Yeah,
people are
because it's
concerned
not
about,
just you, it is your spouse, it's your kids. Like you can bottle up the stress, but everyone can read it on your face. And at the end of the day, your family is going to take on that stress with you. But I think
right?
it goes back to communication, having that dialogue, expressing how you're feeling, your frustrations that you're going through. Because
Mm.
odds are they're going to share that with you and they see it and feel it too.
Made me think of another challenge. I've heard folks say, and I've known leaders in the law enforcement profession that are so well respected and do such an amazing job that one of their hesitations to transition out of law enforcement is that they're going to leave, the fear of leaving a tremendous void. They know they have to move on. They know that everyone's retired that's come before them, but they're fearful that there's going to be this tremendous void. And what I hear time and time again is something interesting. The void. There's a backfilling of that happens so quickly. And within a period of not too many weeks or months, you start finding yourself out of the loop, out of the what's happening today in law enforcement. You don't get the daily stories anymore. Justin, do you remember going through that?
I don't know if I necessarily felt that on my end as a fear, but I witnessed it. And I often thought about mid-career, we had a detective leave our agency, and I just think he was just an amazing detective. I thought, man, these are some tough shoes to fill. That's going to be a hard spot. But what I realized is in his absence, man, just like you said, it was a vacuum. It just inherently, folks migrated into that position. They filled it and they did a very good job at it. And honestly, not to say that that person wasn't missed, but, they weren't missed. Like, missed them, but didn't
Mm.
the job that they were doing was still being fulfilled. And and likewise, in your absence, people will fill that void and
Yeah,
assume that responsibility. They'll rise to the occasion, right?
yeah.
Um, but if you give them the opportunity to.
I think of the general distrust that first responders in law enforcement have for the public. And I think about social circles. Gents, as law enforcement professionals, former, Um, tell me about your social circles. Do you find that during those law enforcement years, like who do you mostly associate with? Who do you mostly hang out with socially, in many cases?
Usually other police officers. They understand what you're going through more intimately. We have sometimes sick and dark senses of humor, and you often can't utilize that amongst the civilian population, right? They're taken aback if you're at a soccer game or a kid's sporting event. Maybe they don't want to hear about something that you've experienced or that you're making light of. They're not ready for that. So yeah, you tend to socialize and talk shop with folks who you work with on a regular basis. Sometimes you consider the civilian someone who doesn't understand what you're going through, somebody who's not getting called in at 2 a.m. because somebody's been, killed in the street. And so how could they relate? But it's important to keep those social circles open and make efforts to meet all sorts of people to maintain a diverse network of friends.
That's huge because to help with the law enforcement transition to a new career, a new job, you don't just want to be a number submitting a resume and a generic cover letter. That's not going to get you the job, right? You really need to think about growing your network in the years prior to retirement, right? You really need to think about rounding yourself out professionally. Um, so I think we're talking about, I guess, three different concepts, guys, right? We're talking about there is the career transition itself. That is to say, what am I going to do next after law enforcement? And there is a huge need for guidance and help and perspective and insight. And that's going to be a follow-up segment to our time together today. I think there's a big element of it is financial. Vince, when you think about challenges with finances, somebody preparing for retirement, and Justin as well, I'll go to Vince first though. When finances, how do finances maybe stand in the way of somebody's decision to finally pull the plug? They've been retirement eligible, they're just hanging on. Why do finances maybe have a cause for pause to leave law enforcement?
Yeah, I think that there's uncertainty or maybe fear that they will not be the individual will not be able to replace the income as easily. In police work, we find that there's a wealth of opportunity to earn overtime. It's almost unlimited if you know where to look for it. So you have somebody who's making the decision to walk away from law enforcement. If they're collecting a 50% pension, essentially reducing their income by half, and definitely there would be fear that they would not be able to make that up in the private sector or with the next job. Perhaps overtime opportunities would be available. So that might be a barrier to making the jump.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, Justin, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I would also say not just the income side of it, but the cash flow side of it too can be a bit of a challenge. And again, I'll use myself as a personal example. I have a wife that left the law enforcement profession biweekly pay, every 2 weeks to a new role where she gets paid once a month. And
Hmm.
so as a household, we had to really take a step back and go, oh my gosh, like our cash flow is going to be significantly disrupted, restructure you know, our expenses and so forth to accommodate that shift in cash flow. And again, that creates another layer of anxiety I think that everyone goes through. And I'll say I experienced it myself, right? But it's not going to stop the process of time. It's going to happen one way or the other. I just need to get on board with it and make it happen. Can't bury my head in the sand.
Yeah.
But it's a reality that many of us have to deal with.
There's so many stressors in life. Finances are a huge one, especially for families, for households, married couples. And there's a saying I heard early in my career. When your money is right, other things can fall more easily into place. Right? When your money's not right, it's a big stressor. But I think that we see people have unrealistic expectations. Vince, thank you for bringing that to my attention. A lot of times people have unrealistic expectations that the pension is going to be sufficient to get them through life, and they may underprepare. And one of the areas that I see that really bright, shining, blinking light that says that supports that is that some agencies, folks have the ability to leave on what's called terminal leave, where when they go, they don't get a buyout of their hours, but rather they stay on the books, right? And they continue getting their base pay. And that delays the reduction to their pension benefits. And in reality, there are other planning techniques that may be more advantageous for certain households to employ. And so sort of becomes this, it's easier to just keep my salary going until it runs out and then go to pension. And I think that there's some short-sightedness on that with regard to, we're only going to live so long. There's only so many months we're going to collect pension in our lifetimes. And the longer we delay the pension, the less we're going to get, if you think of it that way, right?
Mhm.
But sometimes people have an unrealistic expectation, and then financially they have a fear of change. Justin, sort of like you alluded to, we had to shift our household finances to a different pay cycle. It's a fear of change, fear of the money being right. Any other challenges that come to mind, come to light for you guys in your minds? I can think of one more on my own.
I think just as a follow-up to what you said about identity, some people's entire identity is based on their law enforcement career. You develop a reputation as a very good, fill in the blank here, a homicide investigator, a financial crimes investigator, a patrol sergeant, whatever that is. You have such professional capital and respect for your peers. When you leave that, you have to start fresh and, potentially at 45 or 50 years of age to build that professional capital again in whatever your new career field is. And I think that could give you pause to make the change. And it's definitely a challenge that you have to work towards and work through.
Yeah. It's actually made me think of another one. So I've got two. One is when you think about preparing to start interviewing again, we live in such a digital world today. There's social media stuff everywhere. You got to make sure that's all clean, right? You got to make sure your networking is tight and right. It's on point. Your professional LinkedIn profile, get it out there. Actually, it made me think of another one. People are fearful to start looking for jobs and let it be known that they're looking for jobs because, oh my gosh, I might not get promoted again if I don't get the job I want, or I don't want anyone to know I'm leaving. Like there's all these fears that go around. But one of the biggest changes to going from law enforcement to civilian life, particularly in the private sector, is the transition from working in a time and effort economy. That is to say, you get paid by the hour. You want to make more money, you work overtime, you get paid by the hour. You don't get paid by results in law enforcement, right?
Exactly.
You get paid on time and effort. And I notice as I get older, I put a bigger premium on time than I do on money. And I think younger families, it's tough to see that because they need money a lot more than they need time, right? I have time, but I need to make more money to keep a roof over my head, food on the table. Little Johnny, little Susie need to go to school. Mama wants to stay home and she wants a new SUV type thing. But the shift to results in the private sector, that's where job security comes from. It's not necessarily time and effort, but results. I'm wondering if you guys see that as well. Like, does that
I
Yeah.
can see that being a struggle for some. Again, you're accustomed to doing business a certain way, and now all of a sudden the light's on you, and you're expected to do X, whatever X is, whatever profession you go into, and having that limelight on you and having that pressure, I can see, it could leave a sour taste in some folks' mouth and make them a little concerned.
Yeah. So I'm going to transition to solutions then. We brought up a lot of different challenges, things that we might hear around the water cooler, things that may come up in conversation that we've experienced over the last 20 plus years of helping law enforcement professionals. I want to talk about solutions. I think there's so many elements to this, but you've got to have a plan. When you have a plan gives you confidence. All you have to do is work the plan, right? We know if we have a diet and exercise plan and we follow it, results should come. And I think the same thing is true for your retirement transition. And working with trusted professionals can help you get a plan, right? What are some of the other solutions that you gentlemen have seen us employ with others and or that you can think of that can help yourselves and other law enforcement pros as they are faced with that transition?
You think about, you work with a financial advisor, think of it as a financial coach. Well, there's no different on the professional side. There are professional coaches out there to help you navigate through those, the changing dynamics of interviewing and the expectations of employers today that you may not be aware of. Just having a dialogue, communication, seek guidance. There are professionals in every aspect of our lives today, whether it's uh, diet and exercise, whether it's mental health, whether it is professional coaching, financial coaching, what have you. Anywhere you go in life, you can find someone who has a unique skill set in that arena. Seek their guidance. That's what they're there for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would say that avoid the very human tendency towards procrastination.
Mm.
Chris, over the last couple of years of working with you, I've heard you say many times that sometimes a change does not get made until a person feels a pain point. Something happens, right? Well, I would avoid waiting for that to happen. And as we age, I at least get the sense that time passes much more quickly. 3 to 5 years really isn't that long of a period of time when you start to get into your 40s and 50s. And I would suggest avoiding procrastinating to prepare for the next thing. Give yourself 3 to 5 years to train for it, to network for it, prepare your resumes, and try to make a decision as to what's next for you. That would be one of my top solutions. And I think I'm trying to do that myself now. So
yeah, you
It should remind me, several years ago, someone mentioned something to me and said, no matter where you are in life, no matter what you're doing, always have an exit strategy. And I think that's so important, right? Like you always have to make sure that, because you never know, tomorrow is never promised. And even though we may have safety and security in our law enforcement profession, it's never guaranteed. And so you really have to have your house in order for that potential parachute need to be pulled.
Wait, is that why cops always sit in a restaurant facing the door?
mm-hmm.
Okay, all right, just
The
checking.
unexpected, man.
All right,
Always have an exit strategy.
trusted advisors rings a bell to me, right? If you think about it, the pain point, you don't wait to go get your blood pressure checked until you have a heart attack, right? That's not really prudent. And if you have a history of heart disease in your family, you shouldn't wait to go to the cardiologist until after you have chest pain and a heart attack, right? It's something you should be proactive on. And the same thing applies to taxes, right? You should have a qualified tax professional helping you. Same thing when it comes to mortgage planning. Don't try and wing it and do it your own online. Get a trusted professional, somebody that understands credit, somebody that understands the options in the programs and what your goals are. Work with someone who's trusted, insurances, investments. You think of all the angles, including, mental health. And what about career transitions? People are willing to pay to study for a promotional test, right? But what's kind of comical to me is that law enforcement officers, while they love studying together and sharing notes, once it's time to test, the gloves are off. It's every man or woman for themselves, right? And you're competing. And I'm going to say and suggest that it's a scarcity mindset. not an abundance mindset. Oh my gosh, there's only certain positions, there's only a couple spots. It's scarcity, and it gets ingrained in the law enforcement profession. The type A personalities that, and I am one as well. The type A personalities, we're competing all of a sudden. Instead of collaborating, we're competing. It only takes once or twice to feel like we got passed over, feel like we got burned. We don't really want to do that again. But when it's time to transition to a new career, you need to go back to an abundance mindset. Casting your own fishnet is not the same as casting the fishnet together with 100 other people. If all those connections in the nets, all those connections can help land you in the right job. There's so many opportunities out there. You've got to think of abundance and not scarcity. It goes back to Vince, you suggested the social circles, right? The networking. I think that's huge. What other solutions might exist out there, guys, that come to mind? Any? Reflection questions. Where am I heading? Justin, have you ever sat down? I know you actually have. You've sat down and done your own reflection questions, right?
Sure.
And when you've done that, I think, how does that usually turn out?
It's enlightening. We get so ingrained in the day-to-day minutia, just the typical grind, and sometimes we need to pick our head up and look to the horizon and think about the future and what it holds for us, and start mapping that out. And so you can either live life by chance or you can live it by choice, right? And how you choose to live is up to you, right? Now, it may not all happen in the time frame that you expect or anticipate, but if you map it out, odds of success of achieving those things are probably pretty high, right? Because you're going to work towards those goals that you've mapped out for yourself. But if you never write them down, well, life will just kick you in the shorts along the way, and you're just going to move in whatever direction the wind blows you, right?
Yeah. You make me think of many times we've heard, hey, when I leave law enforcement, I'm going to go work and make a bunch of money. And gee whiz, doesn't that sound great? And if we think of it one dimensionally from a financial perspective, sounds good, because if I can lateral out, if I was making $100,000 a year as a law enforcement professional or even more, if I can go get an equal paying job, then I can bank my pension. And man, that sounds great. And as financial professionals, we would all agree, we can really help somebody prepare for their financial future, give them lots of options down the road. However, not always do folks think about what comes with that, right? Maybe there's an awful commute. Maybe there's business travel. Maybe there's a significant amount of inflexibility. Maybe it won't work with the family dynamic of where your children may be, what they're doing, what your family's doing. If you've got a mom or dad that's end of life, if you got to be by their side, or a spouse that has an inflexible job as well, there's lots of challenges. So money shouldn't be the only thing. I think that's why vision setting is important, of what's really important to me. And then you create that vision and then think about what paths may fall into that. Right.
Yeah, I think the other struggle too is having a plan in place to bank. Again, going with your scenario here, banking that pension. If you don't have a plan in place to do that, it's going to get absorbed into the cash flow of the house. 5, 6, 7 months down the road, you go, oh man, I should have been saving this, but I haven't. And now our lifestyle has become a contingent upon that income. And now, you're off your game.
Yeah, what do we call that? Lifestyle creep.
Yeah, exactly.
The more you have, the more you spend.
Something I super admire about you is that, you've got a little time left still as a homicide detective before you're retirement eligible. And gosh, we wish it was tomorrow, right? Wish it was today or last week. But you've also already been a teammate for a number of years of the firm, working with us and helping a lot of our earlier stage law enforcement professionals really get laser focused on finances, as you have been able to do. But I've admired so much your focus before the deadlines there, before the pain point occurred financially and mentally of, well, what am I going to do next? I admire how you focused on that. Is there anything you might share with those that are tuning in as sort of some closing thoughts as to, why was that important for you to start working for what's next and working on what's next for your family rather than waiting till the last minute?
Yeah, I just don't take anything for granted, right? I'm blessed with a great job and a good family and an excellent pay, and I look to a brighter tomorrow, potentially easier retirement when I don't have to work quite so hard, and I get to reap the benefits of what I've accumulated over my lifetime. And I just suggest that everybody stay organized, prepare, and then if you are well prepared, if you are organized, if there's a hiccup in income, if there's a hiccup in career change, what have you, you're so well prepared for it. It becomes, instead of a catastrophe, it becomes a minor inconvenience. And that's how I live my life. I'm just I like to consider myself very well prepared. I don't take anything for granted, and I always am able to transition without having to worry about money or finances. Everything that I'm confronted with could just be a minor inconvenience, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. For our viewers, I want to say thank you for joining us today for this roundtable. Gosh, we went a lot longer than I thought we might, but the realities are we specialize in helping with the law enforcement career transition. We focus on the money aspect of it, but our team of strategic partners, what we do is add as much value as we can in the lives we serve. Our team of strategic partners rounds us out. So please tune in for the other segments. We're planning, again, 3 additional segments. We're going to have a career transition coach. We're going to talk about the money aspect in greater detail, and we're going to talk about the psychological aspect of the retirement transition as well in another segment. And we'll add more if necessary. But thank you so much for tuning in. If you'd like more information, please jump out to our website, throw us a question. We're accessible and available and grateful for the opportunity to help amazing people. Thank you for what you do for our community, and please stay safe. We wish you and your families well, and please stay safe, and we'll look to connect with you soon. Have a wonderful day.